We're going. Hello, everybody, and welcome. And Neil, you haven't got your camera on. Do you want to put it on? There we go. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. There are around about 950 people listening here on this webinar, and many more on YouTube who couldn't get places on the webinar. So you're very welcome. Hopefully you will find it useful, the information that we want to give you, and it will hopefully save you time in applying or deciding not to apply. So I'll just introduce us. My name's Harriet Stranks. I am the Director of Grants, and Michelle Lester, Head of Grants North and Wales. Peter Cunnison, who's Manager for the West Midlands. Rachel Marshall, who is our Manager in Wales. And Neil Shashua, Manager for the North East and Cumbria. And finally, Juliana, who's our Events Coordinator, who organised this today. So you're very welcome. So as we said, it's important to us to not waste people's time if they have little chance of success. So what we want to do is provide you with some really clear information about eligibility, about what does it mean to be a grantee with Lloyds Bank Foundation, and why we've devised this program in the way that we have. So I'm going to hand over to Juliana quickly to talk about housekeeping and give us some sort of technical rules. Juliana.
Wonderful. Thanks again for joining both on Zoom and on YouTube. As this is a webinar, I just wanted to remind everyone, as participants, you can't be seen or heard, but you will be able to see all of our panelists. So for those of you that are familiar with Zoom, you'll notice that you have both the chat function and the Q&A function enabled at the bottom of your screen. However, the chat function is for panelist eyes only, as we want to be certain that we respect everybody's privacy. We're hoping for nearly 1,000 people on this webinar. I can see the numbers are rising, which is great. So therefore, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function, which I'll explain in a moment. We are going to be recording this session today, so the recording won't show your organisation name or your individual name, and written questions won't show on the screen. If you have any technical problems today, please pop this in the chat box and I'll do my best to help you out. The second part of this webinar is dedicated to Q&A, but feel free to use the Q&A function throughout the webinar to submit your questions. You will be able to anonymise these by clicking the Ask Anonymously button in the Q&A box. If you see a question that you're interested in and would also like an answer to that, then please vote for this question by clicking the thumbs up next to it. With so many of you joining us today, we're anticipating that we won't be able to answer all of your questions. Therefore, we would encourage you to ask questions, but also to use the upvoting button, so we're able to prioritise these questions which are most important to the majority of you. Also, as we mentioned in the joining information, we won't be able to answer any specific questions regarding your charity, but please do get in touch with us afterwards and we'd love to catch up with you and answer any questions that you might have. All the contact information will be on the final slide. Those joining us on YouTube, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining. You'll see that the comments box on YouTube is available during this session for you to ask questions. And if you ask questions, these will be fed through the Q&A. Any questions that we can't answer will be followed up by an email via a blog, and we'll also cover those in our FAQs. So thanks very much, and over to you, Michelle.
Okay, I'll just give you a quick run through of the agenda before Michelle jumps in. So so you know what's coming up. So Neil is going to talk through our eligibility criteria, and Rachel will talk about our approach to charities in Wales. Peter will be talking about our priority area of racial equity, and Michelle will talk about what it means to work with a development partner. So once we've done that, that should take us around about half an hour. I recognise it's quite a lot of information to take in, so please do use the questions and chat buttons if you are unsure. And then we'll take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll go over to you for the Q&A. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the programme before handing over to Neil. So this grant programme builds on 6 years of experience of working with charities alongside them working on their organisational development. We've listened to lots of feedback from charities and heard their concerns not only about the changes due to COVID and ways of delivering services differently, but also the enormous challenge of unexpected changes in income and fundraising, etc. So this grant programme is designed with those challenges in mind. It is an unrestricted grants programme, which means that you can spend the money on anything that you need. So whatever is the most pressing need for your charity at this time, you could use it, for example, to build up reserves. You could pay salaries, you could pay rent or utilities, etc. So we know that unrestricted funding is really important to charities, and it means that you've got freedom to do the things that you need to do. We've developed a really simple application process. So there's only 6 main questions to answer, and they focus largely on the challenges and changes due to COVID and how you think a development partner could support your charity. So grants will total 50,000 over 2 years, so 25,000 each year. And for the first 12 months of the grant, we will offer each charity the support of an experienced external development partner to help build resilience and sustainability and to be able to bounce back from the shocks of COVID-19. This is in addition to our very large menu of organisational development support, a programme we call Enhance, and also peer-to-peer learning and cohort learning within each region. We've made a commitment that at least 25% of this fund will directly support Black, Asian, minority, ethnic-led groups, and this is because the people that they support have been and will continue to be significantly affected by the health and economic impact of COVID-19. So applications will close on the 11th of September at 5 o'clock, and we will hope to award grants in December, and the money hopefully getting into people's bank accounts before the end of the year. So that was a kind of a whistle-stop tour of the programme, the bullet points, but I will hand over to Neil to take us through the eligibility criteria. Neil?
Thank you, Harriet. I'm now going to talk you through how we decide which organisations to fund, both in terms of who they are and the work they do. Applications from organisations which do not meet these eligibility criteria will not be considered. So please read our full eligibility criteria after this webinar. You'll find them attached to the email Juliana sent you before this webinar, and you can download a copy from our website. What I'm going to focus on now is the work of the charities that we are looking to fund, both in terms of the people they support, as well as the way in which they support them. A term we use on our website, application forms and guidance is complex social issues. We've identified 11 such issues which we know have a significant impact on people's lives, and it's on these we target our funding. This slide shows, in alphabetical order, our 11 complex social issues, or CSIs for short, which make up our funding priorities. As you can see, they may look and feel quite different, but they are all multidimensional social issues that we believe small charities are well placed to make a significant contribution towards addressing. Our 12th funding priority, racial equity, is one that my colleague Peter will talk about later on in this webinar. We are looking to fund small charities that support people experiencing one or more of these complex social issues. The downloadable information on our eligibility criteria sets out the detail of what we mean by each of these complex social issues and examples of the type of work we may fund. Please do read these carefully, as it may be that even though a charity supports people experiencing those CSIs, we won't fund particular aspects of that work. On our website, once you've selected the issue on which your work is focused, you'll be asked to enter the local authority area where the majority of your work takes place. We recognise that there are many charities that would like and would benefit from our support, but like any funder, we have a limit to the resources we have available. The COVID-19 Recovery Fund will only be able to award grants to 150 charities, and we know there are many more who would be eligible to apply. So to manage this demand, we introduced regional priorities. Although our grants programme is open to small charities across England and Wales, we're currently not open to all of our complex social issues in every area. Our regional priorities take into account the level of investment the Foundation has already given to each complex social issue in each area, as well as the prevalence of eligible small and medium-sized charities in that area which address those issues. It's important to add that we review and update these regional priorities every 6 months. So just because we're not currently funding a particular issue in your area, you should certainly come back to us in due course. So I've talked about our funding priorities, the 11 complex social issue areas, and how, for this grants programme, we are managing demand for funding by setting out which CSI areas are open and closed to applications in which parts of the country. I'm now going to talk about what we're looking for in the charities we fund in terms of the way in which they work with people experiencing these complex social issues. You may hear us call this our programme fit. Because we want to focus on charities that are most likely to have the biggest impact on the lives of people facing complex social issues, we have identified 4 characteristics we think highly impactful work will possess. Again, the definitions of these are covered in a copy of our eligibility criteria for funding. These 4 characteristics are to do with how the charity works with the people it supports. Firstly, the work needs to be in depth. We're looking for charities that support people over a prolonged period with multiple interactions. This will likely be over the course of at least 6 months, but it could be lifelong. So whilst charities we fund may undertake one-off advice, provide online resources, or signpost to other services as part of their work, the majority of their work will be longer term and in depth with the people they work with. Secondly, we are looking for charities that work in a holistic and person-centred way. We recognise that because charities are supporting people with complex social issues, no one single charity or service could be expected to provide for all of their needs. So we're looking for charities that have formed partnerships with others or support their referrals to others. This includes assessing people the charity works with to identify their specific needs and putting a comprehensive plan of support in place. So, for example, for this reason, we're unlikely to support a charity which provides only counselling appointments and nothing else. Thirdly, we fund work which is specifically targeted at people affected by one of these complex social issues to help them overcome, address, or manage that particular issue. Charities we fund will know who their beneficiaries are, understand their needs and their demographics, and proactively seek to support them. And more, they will actively involve the people they support to shape and perhaps even provide their services. Fourthly, we're looking for charities that support people on a positive journey of change, developing new skills, confidence, independence, security, and agency. As such, we expect charities to be able to monitor and measure positive outcome-based changes. We recognise that because of the complexity of the issues charities are supporting people with, what a positive journey of change looks like will be different for different people. It may be more about maintaining people and preventing them getting into a crisis or reducing harm whilst they're in a crisis. And we recognise that not all outcomes like getting a job or moving into stable accommodation, which are more easily measurable than other outcomes. Before I hand you over to Rachel to talk about our approach in Wales, I want to mention a really important criterion we are looking for in the charities we fund. It is that more than half of the work of a charity will need to be addressing one of these complex social issues and delivered in a way that is in-depth, holistic, targeted, and supportive of a journey of change. We call this the 50% rule, and you'll hear my colleagues talk more about it later in this webinar. For example, a charity may provide holistic and in-depth help to people seeking asylum in this country or who are refugees, but alongside services for other communities. Now, for this charity to be eligible for our funding, more than 50% of its work will have to be with asylum seekers and refugees in a way that is in-depth, holistic and person-centred, targeted to meet their needs and supporting them on a journey of change. There are certain very specific circumstances in which this 50% rule does not apply, and Rachel and Peter, as they tell you about the approach in Wales and about our racial equity priority, will tell you about this. Because we are funding core costs, this means we are focusing our funding on the core work of a charity rather than project-specific costs. Additionally, we recognise that charities may not be delivering services in the way they would normally. So we ask on our application form about your pre-COVID work and about your response to the pandemic over the last few months. So to recap, read our eligibility criteria document carefully, as it not only includes information about the types of charities we support, but also the complex social issues they must be addressing and the ways in which you'll need to be working. More than half of your work will need to fit this description in order for you to be funded. Finally, when filling in the form, do bear this in mind, especially when telling us about your work. Over to you now, Rachel.
Thank you, Neil. And for those charities based in Wales, this bit is for you. I'm going to briefly explain a change in the way that we're assessing Welsh applications and why we're doing it. Working with our Wales advisory group, who've been helping us reflect on our approach to supporting Welsh charities for just over a year now, we've put in place a slightly different approach, which we hope will get more funding into Wales. As Neil explained, we tend to fund charities with a deliberate, targeted and majority focus on one of our complex social issues, and we've left them up on the screen so you can have a look again. However, in Wales, we know that there are fewer single issue specialist small charities, so applicants don't always make it past this criteria because they can't demonstrate that more than half their work has this focus. To address this, we've removed this 50% rule so charities in Wales can find it slightly easier to apply. Priority will still be given to specialist charities whose work focuses on one of our complex social issues, but we'll also accept applications from those who might work across a number of these issues. You will, however, have to demonstrate a track record of delivering at least one service or project deliberately targeted at supporting people facing one of our complex social issues, and that this support is in-depth and holistic. For example, you might be a community centre with a really broad programme of different services. And if just one of those services is focused on, for example, providing in-depth support for survivors of domestic abuse, you are welcome to apply under our domestic abuse category. You might be an arts charity that's developed a holistic, person-centred support programme for recent asylum seekers, or a sports charity with a programme to support people with learning disabilities. We'll still be looking for that targeted approach to working with people affected by one of our complex social issues, but it doesn't have to be the sole or majority focus of your charity. It's worth pointing out that the application form will still contain exactly the same questions and will otherwise be assessed in exactly the same way. So please do bear that in mind. All the tips that Neil has just given you and our other speakers will cover as well. So to recap, whilst charities based in Wales will still fill in the same application form, we won't apply the 50% rule in the same way that we do to English charities when we're reviewing your applications. Your work should still offer in-depth and holistic support to people affected by one of our complex social issues. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Peter, who's going to talk about our racial equity priority and how we're treating that slightly differently as well. Over to you, Peter.
Wonderful, thank you, Rachel. So, as my colleagues have stated, one of the aims of this recovery fund is to ensure that we are targeting investment into the areas of highest need. COVID-19 has shone a light on the vast inequalities that exist. We know that there is an explicit link between most of our complex social issues and racial inequality, and that these intersecting inequalities are best addressed by the small charities that are rooted in the communities they serve. The disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on health outcomes for Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities is well evidenced, and has led our board to agree that at least 25%
Sorry,
of our
Peter.
COVID recovery
Peter.
fund. Hello?
Sorry, Peter, you're really quiet and people are struggling to hear. I don't know if you could just turn your mic up. Sorry to interrupt you.
What I can do. Is that any better?
It's a bit better, but maybe just get closer to your mic if you can't get near.
Apologies for coming so close. Right, so as I was saying, we to try and get this right, we have created a new category of funding which we've called racial equity. We've used the term equity because we recognise that this is a fair way to achieve equality, because this takes into account individual needs and accounts for identities such as ethnicity and circumstances that may otherwise hinder the success of one participant over another. In terms of minority ethnic communities, we mean those that have historically experienced marginalization, racialization, oppression, and prejudice. Therefore, also within this scope is work that benefits Jewish communities, Gypsy and traveller communities, and some migrant communities. I'm sure many of you will be wondering, I wonder if this includes my community. Well, I can tell you we have a broad definition in mind. However, when assessing these applications, we'll be looking for you to have demonstrated the marginalization, the racialization, the oppression, and the prejudice experienced by your service participants in your community in order to be considered. In order to be eligible, more than half of your trustee board should self-identify as being Black, Asian, or from minority ethnic communities. In addition to this, we would also expect your organisation to deliberately support people from one or more of these minoritized communities. So going through the process through our website, once you've established that you satisfy these criteria and you select racial equity, you'll next be asked where you are based. So we've identified 54 local authority areas in England and Wales that have larger proportions of Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities alongside high levels of deprivation. Only applications for services falling within these areas will be prioritised. And Neil also mentioned the 50% rule, which we apply when we're determining how strongly an application meets a complex social issue. We've acknowledged that in many cases, charities have to respond to a number of overlapping complex social issues, and in many cases, they don't specialise or focus on one. So whilst we continue to review the level at which charities who apply under racial equity run services that are in-depth, analytic, we won't need the majority of your work to specialise and have a majority focus on any one complex social issue, very similar to the approach we're taking in Wales. It's also worth mentioning at this point that an organisation that is led by members of Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities can still apply under one of our other complex social issues, if indeed they may meet the 50% rule for that complex social issue and they pass our eligibility online checker. So my turn to recap. Hope you've heard me quite clearly, but the key points to remember are at least a quarter of our budget will go to charities with a majority of Black, Asian or minority ethnic trustees under our racial equity funding category. Whilst these charities will still need to be delivering specialist services for people affected facing one or more of our complex social issues, it doesn't have to be the majority of the focus of your work. and you still have to fill in the same form with the same questions as everyone else though. I'd now like to hand over to my colleague Michelle. Michelle will take you through one of the new elements of this programme, which is the development partner. Michelle?
Thanks, Peter. As mentioned earlier by Harriet, the introduction of the development partner is what sets this funding apart from our usual way of working. And I just want to explain a bit about why we've chosen to work in this way, as well as what that means for you and your charity. So since COVID-19 started to impact back in March, we've been hearing from small charities who've shared with us the many challenges they've been dealing with, and all had one thing in common, that they had no breathing space to enable them to think and plan for the longer term. Therefore, under this fund, each charity will be allocated a development partner over the first 12 months of the grant. So that's running from January to December 21. The development partner will spend on average half a day a month with your charity, helping you to identify and address the practical and strategic needs dependent on your own development priorities. This will be hands-on support like we've never really offered it before, with the development partner working closely with you and your team. They'll provide one-to-one support to reflect on your charity's development needs and give you the help and breathing space that you need to start to address them. You'll also be able to call on additional development support from our Enhanced programme, making use of experts in their field, for example, with service redesign, digital development or financial literacy. But the development partner will be by your side, helping you to put in place the building blocks to recover from the COVID-19 crisis. So what does this mean in practice for charities thinking of applying to this programme? We know that there are many charities who would benefit from this programme. However, as you've heard, we can only award funding to 150. That's why we want to make sure that those charities we partner with will welcome and actively engage with this additional intensive support. And we don't just mean your chief exec. Crucial to the success of this programme will be the full engagement of your board and senior staff team. You might hear us refer to this as your appetite for development, and it'll be a key criteria for us when we look at your application form and in the subsequent conversation which you might have with your regional manager. When you come to look at our application form, you'll see that we ask questions about your charity's development needs and what you might do to address them. However, it's important to note, we're not looking for charities to have already worked this out. That's the kind of thing the development partner will be able to help with. But what we're looking for is charities that would really benefit from the development support as much as they would from the funding. The charities we fund in this way will also have access to the normal Lloyds Bank Foundation development opportunities and support. But in addition, we'll be working with you in a regional cohort, offering the chance for charities to come together, share their experiences and support each other alongside the help of the development partner. We envisage that charities will need to commit to attending at least 3 of these events each year, but their focus will be decided by you, the charities involved. We'll be holding open recruitment for the development partners, and we'll be looking for a wide range of diverse skills and experiences to fulfil these critical roles, and we will be seeking charity representatives to support us in the interview process. So to recap, each one of the charities we support in this fund will be given a development partner to help them identify and achieve their organisation's goals over the first year of the grant. The funding is only for you if you have an appetite and the capacity to take this on. So whilst we're saying half a day on average a month, it's likely to require a lot more commitment from you and your board. The exact focus of the relationship will be determined by you, but we're hoping that with the help of the development partner, your charity can become more resilient and effective over the coming year, recovering well from the COVID-19 crisis so that you're able to continue to help the people you work with. And I'm going to hand back over to you now, Harriet.
Sorry, Harriet, I think you're muted still.
helpful. Thanks for that, Michelle. So that gives you a run through of our program. What we're going to do now is take a 5-minute break and come back here at 2:35, and where we'll do questions and answers and hopefully give you further clarification. Thank you. Hello everybody, welcome back. Okay, we've got 107 questions and rising rapidly. I've had a look through them, or what I could in that quick few minutes. So one of the most common questions was the clarification about the 50% rule. So where charities work across a broad range, or they might have one or two issues that they're focusing on. Peter, would you like to give us a further clarification of the 50% rule and how we apply it?
Right, so we normally look for organisations to focus the majority of their work on the particular complex social issue they're applying under, because I think Neil might have mentioned in his presentation that there are lots of organisations who touch on all of those areas or overlapping complex social issues as a natural course of their work, but sometimes that's incidental. So because the nature of the programme, the criteria of the programme is on in-depth and specialist interventions, we'll be looking for you to evidence how at least the majority of your work, more than 50%, reaches and is specialised in focusing on supporting that complex social issue. There are a number of ways you can evidence that. It could be through the stats you keep of the issues and the outcomes you're addressing with your service users. It could be the funding that you receive. If you're receiving restricted funding for a specific area of your work, then in reality, it could be argued that the majority of your work is focused on a complex social issue. So there are different ways that you can evidence that, but essentially, this is a targeted programme that's looking to support charities that are focused in those areas. And that's why we apply the 50% rule to separate those that touch on a number of areas from those that are focusing on really specialist in-depth interventions.
Thank you, Peter. One of the other questions that's come about that I can answer quickly was how we're splitting up the 150 grants. So there is going to be around about 12 to 15 in each regional manager area. That's a quick one. Income size is something else that's come up. So charities that have income between 1 million and 25,000 and 1 million. Michelle, do you want to talk about that quickly?
Yeah, we can do. So our focus is very much on small, medium-sized charities, which is the income bracket that we're talking about, 25 to £1 million. That's not to say that we don't think that larger organisations, larger charities are doing valuable work, but our specialist and our focus is around that small and medium-sized organisation. So small and local organisations, kind of at the heart of the community, addressing the needs of local communities. We get significant volume of applications coming in under every programme that we open, and therefore need to have particular criteria to kind of, we can't fund everybody as much as we'd like, and therefore that is one of our key criteria. It's where our area of specialism is. It's also one of our national priorities about championing the role of small and medium-sized charities across a range of policy areas. So it's important for us that our funding is reflective of that.
Thank you, Michelle. Neil, I'm coming to you next. We've got a question about what does in-depth mean? So we've got a few questions about I run a national project, or I run a digital project, for example. Could you just give us a rundown on what do we mean by in-depth?
Yes, thank you. So if we go back to the example I gave earlier around a charity that's focused the majority of its work on asylum seekers and refugees, what in-depth would mean in this instance is not only one-off advice, say, about immigration or about no recourse to public funds or those sorts of things, but something where they are the charity is working with the person to get more and more of their needs met. So those could be around housing, around education, around basic needs, around welfare support, around mental health support, those sorts of things. And within that, That's not surface, that's in depth. It often goes with working with someone over a long period of time. We're saying at least 6 months, but it could be a lot longer. There are many organisations that work with people at great volume, but for a short period of time for each person. We're saying that we're interested in working with charities, partnering with charities that do something that's more in-depth, more holistic, more person-centred.
Thank you, Neil. And Rachel, there's a question here for you about a charity that works with people near Cheshire, so people in Wales and in England. Are they eligible to apply?
Yes, they'd be eligible to apply, but they have to apply under the local authority area where the majority of their work takes place. So when you're entering your details into the website eligibility checker, if you use that local authority in terms of determining your eligibility.
Thank you. And Peter, could you talk a little bit about regional priorities and how we come to decide what they are and where people can find that information?
So the website itself will immediately tell you if your the area, as Rachel touched on, where the majority of your work is taking place is eligible under that complex social issue. All of the regions and areas that we support, we've had to find ways to manage, as Michelle said, the volumes that we receive going through. So what we've done is we've looked back historically on where which of those complex social issues have received significant amounts of investment through the foundation, and then we've set priorities. So the issue there isn't so much about you being eligible, it's about us having to set priorities so that we can ensure that our investments go as far and as wide as we can. So it differs across all of the different areas that regional managers cover, but it's based on historical investment and funding and ensuring that we can target areas that aren't getting so much investment. This applies to the complex social issues and to some degrees to the local authority areas as well, because the regional manager is aware of where there are other services, other activities, strong presence, other sources of funding that might be influencing the availability of support for charities that are operating possibly under that complex social issue or in that local authority area. So it's not a scientific approach, but it's based on our current awareness and historic investment that we've put in place today. But it's always best to look at the website eligibility checker, and it will guide you through. But as Neil says, we review that regularly. Every 6 months we'll review and we'll go back, and if that level of investment was further in the past, or if there are other factors we need to take into place for a complex social issue, we'll update and we'll change.
Thank you. Michelle, could you talk a little bit about charities and CIOs? There's quite a few questions about we're not a registered charity, we're a community group, or etc.
Yeah, so this funding programme is only open to registered charities, and that's incorporated charities, but it's not KICs or community organisations that are registered for the Charity Commission. And it's something that we review regularly when we're refining our strategy, but we reflected more recently that we were staying with the registered charity criteria, not least because that gives us some of the due diligence area that we would need to broaden out if we were to open up to KICs in terms of reviewing governing documents, kind of where assets on dissolution might go. There's a whole host of things, and what we're trying to do is to simplify our process as much as possible for the charities that we support, and therefore for now we're sticking with registered charities only.
Thank you. Question about I'm sorry, this thing keeps scrolling. How many grants we're making in each area, and whether or not there is a ring-fenced budget for Wales. Do you want to take that one, Rachel?
Yeah, as Harriet said earlier, we're aiming for about 12 to 15 grants in each of our regions that we cover, and that includes Wales. The funding isn't ring-fenced for Wales, so it'll be a competitive process of charities applying in the same way and meeting the criteria as best as they can.
Thank you. So there's a couple of questions about asylum seekers and refugee charities supporting people with no recourse to public funds. That's a fairly quick one. We do support those charities, and if you were supporting trafficking as well, then if 50% is likely to be in one or the other of those areas, so that would still be fine. Let's see. There's quite a few questions around physical health and illness and disability, and they don't seem to be covered under the complex social issues. So there's a question about that. Do you want to take that, Neil?
Thank you. Yes. So there isn't a dedicated complex social issue which we've tagged as around physical disabilities, but actually we are open to work across any of those other 11 complex social issues that supports people with physical disabilities. So similarly to so it may be that someone with a physical disability is supported by your charity, and the focus of your work is around the fact that they are an asylum seeker refugee, or a young parent. That's the work we're talking about, so that's fine.
Thank you, Neil. Peter, one for you. And there's a lot of questions about whether people can add up multiple complex social issues to make up the 50%.
That would apply for certainly the racial equity complex additional criteria that we've added. But there does need some, the 50% rule does mean that there needs to be a majority for a main complex social issue. We always ask for a main complex social issue. So that you will need to, so we've touched on, as we've said, a lot of organisations, community-based organisations, will see lots of complex issues, social issues overlap as a matter of course. But this programme is about deliberate, focused interventions and specialist experience of working in those areas. So whilst we do appreciate that there will be a number of CSIs, as we say, complex social issues that charities will address, you will need to show that there is a main complex social issue that you reach and you support, and you have got your experience of supporting to be eligible.
Thank you. So some questions about what if your income is under 25% or is likely to be in your next accounts. Rachel, do you want to take that one?
Sorry, did you mean under the 25,000?
25,000 to the minimum income threshold.
Yeah, so we're basing it on your previous set of accounts. So that needs to show the income bracket between the 25,000 at the lower end and the £1 million at the upper end. So we'll be basing it on your last available set of accounts.
So for those of you that might have some changes, if you wanted to get your accounts in sooner, then that would be possibly worthwhile doing. Neil, a question for you. Could you talk to us about why we fund adults, and what if a charity works across a range or works with children, etc.?
Certainly. We fund work with adults because really that's an important focus for us. We know we have a very limited pot of money, and we know there are many other charitable funders that support a range of different age groups. So we focused on adults. And I've now forgotten the second part of the question, Harriet. Apologies for that.
Sorry, where an organisation works with both young people and adults.
Okay,
or works with parents of children facing complex social issues.
Yes, so our focus is on the adults really. So if it's really around the parents of people, of young people or children with disabilities or that fall into other areas, we would want to understand your work around what's your support around the parents. We recognise that families are not separable into segmented ways, but that our focus is on those adults. So we want to sort of understand how you're working with them to support them, what you understand about their needs, the different sorts of interventions and areas of support around that.
Thank you, Neil. Another question about the 50% rule, which I agree can be a little overwhelming. Is it measured, Peter, by turnover or numbers of beneficiaries?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the organisation needs to evidence itself, whatever measure it has in place. So we fund different size and strengths of charities, so there's a broad way in which we'll look for you to demonstrate how you evidence that. So I don't want to say that there's any specific rule that we use for it. It's for an organisation to use one of the measures that they have at their disposal to evidence that the majority of their work, or the main beneficiaries, the predominant beneficiaries of their work, are more than 50% of that, their main complex social issue.
Thank you. Back to regional priorities. Michelle, can I apply in Oxford? Your website says I can't. What does this mean?
Okay, so it would depend on the complex social issue that your charity is mainly addressing. If you've entered the complex social issue and then the local authority area where the majority of your services are delivered, and you get a message to say that you're not eligible to apply, that's because we've determined that for now, we won't be funding that complex social issue in that area. Similarly, for any other kind of issues, so we will be open to some complex social issues in that local authority area, but it just really depends in terms of the majority of your work.
Thank you. Rachel, could you talk about what does track record mean and how long a charity should have been operating?
So we're looking for charities who've been operating for a minimum of a year and who are able to demonstrate their track record on working with that number of groups within the complex social issue area. Because we're asking for your latest set of accounts, that you need to have been operating for at least a year and demonstrating that you're having that in-depth and targeted focus on the complex social issue area.
Thank you. Michelle, back to you. Could you talk to us about how we're going to source our development partners and whether somebody could volunteer to be a charity representative to help us interview them?
Okay, so we're currently finalising the process, so please bear with us. But we will be having an open recruitment for the development partners. There will be one development partner for each of the foundation's regional areas and Wales. So we will have an open recruitment. We'll be looking for development partners with a wide range, diverse range of skills and experience. And we will most likely have a two-stage recruitment process where we will ask some charity representatives to support us in that. If you're interested, you can drop me an email. We'll kind of take that level of interest. We're getting a lot of requests from people who are interested in becoming a development partner. So what I would say is kind of watch this space. We will go out to open recruitment, and anybody who's expressed an interest, we're keeping their details out and we'll share that. So yeah, if you're interested in supporting us from the charity perspective, that'd be really welcome. Thank you. Drop me an email.
Thank you. I'm going to give out your email address now.
Yeah.
Neil, can you take this one? I've got a grant, either Invest Enable or one of the COVID funds from earlier in the year. Am I eligible?
You are, if your grant ends at the end of December this year. You will be eligible, and that's clear. So if your grant ends by the end of December this year, please do apply.
Thank you. Peter, how are older people supported in this grant programme?
Older people isn't one of our specific complex social issues. But it doesn't mean that older people as a beneficiary group are ruled out from benefiting from the programme. It would just need to be fitting within one of the other within one of the 11 complex social issues, and there's not a problem in that being a focus or a feature of an application. It's just that that's not one of the qualifying criteria.
Thank you. Neil, one for you. Mental health is very broad. Does it include dementia? So could you talk about how we define mental health complex social issue?
It is indeed very broad. It doesn't include dementia or neurological difficulties, but it does include a really wide range of mental health problems. However, we tend to focus really on those mental health problems that have been diagnosed as such, so that they are mental health issues where there's really a significant impact on people's lives. So we haven't got a list of diagnoses and whether we would fund this one or not. It's much more about the impact of those mental health problems on people's daily lives, be there around employment, maintaining and developing relationships, their housing. Remember, these are all about complex social issues. So if someone with a mental health problem actually are able to, doesn't have a massive impact on their life, can perhaps be dealt with much more at a primary care level, that's not generally what we're looking for. We're looking for people with a complexity of stuff. So they may well have mental health difficulties and others as well.
Thank you. Rachel, will you support charities which have a national rather than a local focus? So this goes back a little bit to what Neil was saying about in-depth and holistic as well.
Yeah, and targeted, obviously. So by that we mean charities who target a specific community of interest or a specific location or geography with their work. Really, what we find is not large charities, national charities are often too large for our funding. We are preferring to work with small and local charities. So we're looking for that local level or at least a sub-regional level. And you will find when you go to the website and put in your area through the complex social issue, we're looking for one specific local authority for you to identify as being your main area of operation.
Okay, thank you. Still got quite a few questions about working with people aged 17 and over, and whether or not beneficiary groups, whether that excludes where there are beneficiary groups in working with the charity that are younger. Peter, could you take that again, just go over that?
Yeah, no, it doesn't exclude. I mean, we do fund charities that are doing work in schools, and supporting people as they leave full-time education, but that won't be the focus of the grant. So that's not an issue in itself. It is to be careful and mindful when you're making an application that the focus of the funding that you're applying for and the issues that you're looking to for support to address are for all the reasons Neil's outlined earlier. It is not a value judgment on the needs of people aged under the age of 17. It's just the focus for our funding is for 17 and above, and it'd be really important to make that distinction whilst conveying the wide range of experience and expertise you may have for all ages, but to ensure that you're focusing on the area of work. And again, going back to the 50% rule, the majority of your work does focus on 17 and above. That's a key criteria. And not wanting to be an apologist, we really recognise the value of work that you're doing. We just have to find a way, as Harriet, Michelle, we've all said, is not drawing you down the garden path for thinking that there'll be funding and that we're not focusing on at this time. So it is 17 and above.
Thank you. Michelle, one for you. Our domestic abuse charities covers more than one local authority area. If the regional priorities are open in one place and not the other, what do they do?
Okay, well, it depends where the majority of your work is delivered. So which is the local authority where the majority of your work is delivered, and is that open under the complex social issue for that particular area? If it's 50-50, so if you're covering over two areas and it's 50-50, and one of those areas is open, then fine, apply under that area.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions about how can we find out which of the local authority areas are open for what, and where are the 54 areas where we specifically wanted to target Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. Do you want to take that, Peter?
I would say the quickest way, so we're not publishing a full list, but the quickest way we've tried to do it is via our website. So put the details in, the information's in at the back end. It's a quick and easy way to go online, check the main complex social issue you're applying under, or if you're applying under the racial equity, put in the details. As mentioned in the presentation earlier, we have looked at the local authority areas, and we've taken the top 54 local authority areas with the highest proportions of Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities and high levels of deprivation. And that's the reasoning beyond why we've selected them. You just put the details of the local authority in our website checker, and I'll tell you straight away whether you're eligible to apply.
Thank you. One for you, Rachel. We work with all individuals across the CSIs and also support organisations whose work falls within CSIs. As a volunteering infrastructure organisation, are we eligible?
Well, you would have to be a registered charity, and you would need to show that your work is in person-centred and holistic, as Neil described earlier, which you're maybe not able to do if you're an infrastructure organisation. So I think you need to look at the type of work that you do with the individuals that you support. And if that's supporting other charities or other third sector organisations, then it might not be appropriate for you to apply.
Thank you. So some charities that are watching now have received what we called the REACT funding, which was a top up from their existing grants to help them with adaptations due to COVID. Neil, do you want to take this? If you have one of those grants, are you eligible?
You may be eligible. So our REACT fund was more of a kind of response fund to help with the immediate costs of COVID. It could be for PPE, it could be extra fundraising support, etc. And that was available to all of our existing grantees before May of this year. Now, if you're one of those, if you've got a REACT fund, a grant, and your main grant from us, which we would call invest or enable, using those terms, ends by the 31st of December this year, you are eligible to apply for this fund. So you may want to consider that. So a REACT fund grant in itself does not preclude you from applying. It's the main grant we give you. You need to look at that, and if that ends by the end of December this year, then you're eligible.
Okay, thank you. We're coming up to the close now, so there's one question that I'll just answer before we say thank you and goodbye. So there's a question about is there anywhere else where the 50% rule does not apply? And there is. This is specifically because we're undertaking some development work in these locations. They are Redcar and Cleveland, Holton, Bolsover, Great Yarmouth, Telford and Wrekin, and Merthyr Tydfil. Which that's just to complicate matters even more. But thank you all for joining us. I hope you found that useful. It's been really good to see your questions, because that's given us lots of feedback about the clarity of our information. Oh, I'm sorry. I've just been told we're meant to be going until 3:30, so we'll keep going. Sorry about that. Okay, back to the questions. Will development partners, Michelle, cover also all the places? Or is it just specific places, for example, Ealing in London?
Okay, so every organisation, every charity that's funded under this programme will be allocated a development partner for the region in which they're based, so the regional manager region in which they're based. So that's likely to be, in each regional manager's patch, a group of between 12 and 14 charities. who we will kind of work with as a cohort with that one development partner. We'll be recruiting 11 to replicate the 11 regional managers. So they will support you on a one-to-one basis, so working with you to identify what your development needs are and helping you to address those needs, but also then bringing you together as a group of charities to support one another. So throughout the first year and actually ongoing, hopefully you'll develop a kind of a strong network there that will carry on throughout the second year of the grant as well. So every organisation will have access to a development partner under this grant.
Thank you. Michelle, do you also want to cover, so this question is, when will Lloyds grants, regular grants, be back open? So do you want to talk about our learning approach with the development partner?
Yeah, so a key focus for us is about, we've recognised, like everybody, the impact of COVID, and that the needs of organisations will change significantly in terms of their service delivery, their business models, their funding position. We're hoping that through the recovery programme, this will help us to learn from what is best for organisations going forward. So the development partners, part of the remit for a development partner, alongside working with the charities, will be about informing our learning about the challenges and the responses of charities as a result of COVID-19. That learning will produce some regular learning insights throughout the year, but that learning will help to inform our strategy beyond 2021, so our strategy for 22 and beyond there.
Thank you. A question again for you, Michelle. Why is it that charities working with domestic abuse perpetrators have to hold the respect accreditation, but those working with domestic abuse overall do not need to be working towards accreditations?
Okay, so we've changed our positioning on this very recently. So up until this programme, we have asked for organisations to be working to or hold the respect accreditation. However, given that we're now providing completely unrestricted funding, that policy doesn't kind of hold its ground anymore, because you could apply to us today, not be delivering perpetrator work, and then set up a perpetrator programme tomorrow. And actually what you do with the unrestricted grant is entirely up to you. So we no longer have that requirement around perpetrator work. The rationale for for wanting that in the first place was really about kind of the safety aspects for the victims of perpetrators, and making sure that charities had all the relevant safeguards in place. But we recognise that that's good practice, but we won't any longer insist on it. So we will be still checking with you how you're safeguarding the people that you support, but we don't have that as a requirement anymore.
Thank you. A question here about what are the chances of success for this grant programme. Obviously, we can't predict how many applications we will get. We're trying to give as clear information as we possibly can to help people decide whether or not this grant programme is for them, and whether it's worth the time in applying, because we appreciate it takes a lot of resources to go through any grant application process. So I can only give you figures based on our previous grant rounds. So if you applied to us under a previous programme, then we would, out of absolutely everyone that applied, which would include people who were ineligible, there would be about a 25% success rate, and that would vary across regions very slightly. In terms of people who got through to the second stage, we try very hard to make sure we're not wasting people's time, as I said, and we take that up to around about 75%. So this grant programme is a one-stage programme because we wanted to turn the applications around as quickly as we could. So we've got an 11-week turnaround, which still sounds long, but it's still going to be quite pressurized our end, and we just can't say how many people will apply. So hopefully it will be somewhere between 25 and 75%, I should think. Doesn't help much, does it?
We're hoping, Harriet, aren't we, that actually throughout the process, that if it becomes very clear to us from a conversation with a regional manager or through the application itself, that we'll have that conversation with charities beforehand, but we can't predict when it gets.
Exactly. So we will tell people if the chances of success are lower, and advise them not to continue, and we will provide very clear feedback as to why that is. Peter, a question that you could take. 50% of our service users are Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, and they focus on CSIs. Does this mean we're eligible? Quite an easy one.
50% of the service users are Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, and they focus on one of the complex social issues. Well, then you are eligible. Well, the majority of your work, so 51% needs to be. Really just need to look at how you evidence that. But if it's 51% of your work is Black, Asian, and minority ethnic, and it's VA, and your organisation is Black, Asian, minority ethnic led, then you would certainly apply for the racial equity criteria. But again, we go back to the 50% rule for another complex social issue.
Thank you. Okay, just gonna get up to the most popular questions again. There's so many of them. We fit your criteria, but we're concerned that we got turned down for core funding a year ago. Neil, would you like to take that one?
Yes, those applications that were presented to grants panel and were turned down by the grants panel are not eligible to apply until a year afterwards. But not eligible to get an award until a year afterwards. So you may be within the window of being able to apply within this fund if you got turned down before December of last year. You'd need to look at why that was, the feedback that we gave you about why your application was rejected.
Thank you, Neil. Michelle, do you want to take this one? This is, are the development needs of the organisation specifically about resilience and sustainability, or can it be more about strategic priorities, who and how we work with, etc.? Yeah.
So the organisational development needs are your organisational development needs. So what you're prioritising. We anticipate that a lot of organisations will be focused around their resilience going forward, but it's down to you. What are your priority needs? And we anticipate that when the development partner is working with the organisation, that they'll sit down and have a conversation with you about and use a common format to determine, so a bit like a diagnostic tool, for want of a better word, to kind of, so we've got a standard framework, they'll work with you to undertake that, and out of that will fall your organisational development needs, but actually it will be your priorities, not ours. So it's really down to kind of you. On the application form, we ask you to identify what your most pressing development needs are currently over the next 18 months. So we're not asking you to list a whole host of development needs. It's really kind of what is the one thing that is the biggest challenge or anxiety for your organisation, and kind of how might you address that, but it's yours. Organisational resilience might form part of that, and it might not. It might.
Thank you. Neil, can you talk to us a bit about partners and partnerships? What evidence are we looking for out of a partnership?
Partnerships come in many forms, don't they? And so what we're looking for is that you and the partners that you're working with have some form of strong partnership. So, you know, at the lower level, I suppose, if you look at the ladder of participation, the ladder of partnership, at a lower level, it's simply awareness that there are other organizations who are working in your area, working on the same complex social issues as you, that your beneficiaries also access. We're really looking at sort of a bit more at the other end of the spectrum, really, or ladder, to mix my metaphors, which is more about relationships where you and the partners you work with have a real sense of togetherness and understanding of what you do that's around the beneficiary. So it's looking at what their needs are, and that you and your partner are together meeting those needs in some way. It's not simply a surface thing about we simply refer to that organization down there and we're not sure whether people get there or not. So when you're referring, we're interested in, are you understanding why you're referring? What's going to happen at the other end? Are you accompanying the referral? All those sorts of things. So those are the sorts of partnerships we're looking for. I appreciate it's a very generic term. It's a somewhat overused term. We're looking for strength and as well as depth of partnership too.
Thank you. A question about age groups. We're not sure we fully answered it. Being that we work with young people under and over 17 years old, would we still be eligible? More than 50% of beneficiaries are 17 or over, but we also have a significant number of 16-year-olds accessing our services. Michelle, do you want to talk about support for 16-year-old?
Yeah, so we would be looking for the majority. So what is the majority of the people that you support? If the majority of people you support are over 17, then that's fine, you're eligible to apply. We do have an exception, which is our leaving care. Peter might need to correct me here. Leaving care and young parents are the only exception to that rule. So if
couple of questions here, Peter, you can take these. Will the 50% rule of trustees from Black, Asian and minority ethnic community apply in Wales? Oh, actually, sorry, Rachel, you can take that one.
That one will only apply if you're applying under the racial equity strand, and of the 54 areas that Peter mentioned, 3 of those are in Wales. So it's Swansea, Cardiff and Newport. So you'll be able to demonstrate that more than 50% of your board are from Black and minority ethnic communities in that respect. If not, a Black and minority ethnic focused organisation or those with some board members from those communities can still apply under the other complex social issue areas.
Thank you. Neil, one for you. If our board is not more than 50% from Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities, but our staff are we eligible?
No, because actually the values of the organisation, the governance of the organisation, the legal responsibility of the organisation vests in the Board of Trustees. And therefore by Black led, we mean led by the people who are legally responsible for the organisation. So that's why we've set that bar high, or bar at that level.
Thank you. Michelle, do you want to quickly talk about what's how our approach to outcomes and monitoring for this grant programme?
Yeah, sure. So because we're really interested in organisations that work in depth holistically, person-centred with organisations, but we recognise that as a result of COVID-19, many organisations have had to kind of step back and adapt the way that they support. Organisations do a lot more emergency support, which would not normally meet our threshold around in-depth, but so we're interested in organisations that do that as a norm, but recognise that might not be the case now. And as a result of that, we're not asking organisations to set objectives or outcomes for this programme. We're really just interested in kind of what is it that you're doing and how are you responding and adapting in light of COVID. So we're asking you to tell us that story, but we're not asking you and we're not expecting you to set any outputs targets. Our monitoring will be primarily learning throughout the year from you and from the development partners, but we will also have a national evaluation partner who will support this. So we've identified what our success measures will be in terms of how we're supporting organisations, and an evaluation partner will come in and they'll want to talk to the charities in the last quarter of the year to kind of find out about kind of what difference that's made. The development partner will also kind of feed back into that, but we will be expecting that the charity signs off anything that the development partner feeds in. So it's not something that's happening behind closed doors, it will be with you, but the onus and the burden of that monitoring will sit with the development partner and not with the charity.
Thank you. So I just want to go back to a question that we haven't quite answered. So the income threshold of 25,000, that is measured over 1 year, the latest published accounts on the Charity Commission guidelines. We do, however, during our assessment, look at the history of an organisation. So I think the 25k is to get through the door, and then after that we try and understand the charity in more depth. So I hope that helps. Another question about we look after children and young people of parents who are asylum seekers, who obviously meet lots of the CSIs. Peter, do you want to take that? Can they be supported? They're working with the children of asylum seekers as opposed to the asylum seekers themselves.
Technically, no. So their children who are refugees and asylum seekers are entitled to statutory support. So if the main beneficiary that you're looking to support is a child, the answer would, in that sense, would be no. We are looking for adults who are, we've got a specific criteria, who are new in the asylum process, or they've been given refugee status within the last couple of years. So it's quite specific criteria for refugees and asylum seekers.
Thank you. Neil, do you want to take this one? Can we still access the enhanced support if we are not successful for a grant?
Unfortunately not, no. No, our enhanced support is tied into those we give a cash grant to. Now, what you may know if you kind of tracked us over the long period is that what we've done more and more is focus more increasingly on the development work. And so for this grant, this is about a cash grant and a development partner together, and it's the bit together that gives us its strength, and because it's about recovery, resilience, sustainability, those sorts of issues. So there isn't a separate developmental support offer that we're giving to those who are unsuccessful at this application.
Thank you. Do we support charities that support people who have acquired brain injuries? Rachel.
Typically not within our mental health and complex social issue. Through the website link, you'll be able to get a detailed explanation of what we do cover, but unfortunately not, and that's not something that falls within the definition at the moment.
But if they were facing other complex social issues as a result, then of course, you know, that's something else, isn't it? We are a small charity looking to work with a large local partner, and our income might go over £1 million. Or there was another question about our income is over £1 million, but we're holding partnership funds. Neil, would you like to take that?
Yes, we'd certainly look at that on a case-by-case basis. What we're interested in is what's your core work about? And so if your core work is really about supporting people with complex social issues, then that's what we do. If there's a lot of it that's passported out to other organisations who actually do the delivery, we might be more interested in looking at, you know, are they applying to us for that work? So we'd probably on that situation look at it on a case-by-case basis where there's this kind of borderline situation.
Thank you. I think thank you all for participating and asking such interesting questions, and I think it's given us lots of food for thought in terms of where we can be more clear on the website or anything like that. So really appreciate you joining us. We have one last request that you fill in a very quick poll at the end. I just wanted to say though, if there was, there you go, there's the poll. I just wanted to say that we are running another Twitter Q&A on the 13th of August between, oh sorry, hang on, this Thursday we're running a Twitter Q&A between 1 and 2 where you can talk to your regional manager, and in addition we'll be running another webinar on the 13th of August specifically for the charities based in Redcar, Cleveland, Holton, Bolsover, Great Yarmouth, Telford and Wrekin and Merthyr Tydfil, where we're doing some more intensive development work. So thank you everyone. It's been great to have you with us, and good luck with your applications. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.